This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Hing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio. Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. Joan and Janet are subtle energy empaths who navigate consciousness. Their passion is to support you in your evolution. As consciousness, we are all one. One mind, one heart, free of all limitations. Experience this reality with us and discover how it can make a difference in your daily living. Join us in a state of grace as we explore, with warmth and humor, this thing we call life. Now, here are Joan Newcomb and Janet Barrett.
Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. We're your co-host, Joan Newcomb, coming to you from Tacoma, Washington, and my partner, Janet Barrett's coming to you from Portland, Oregon.
Hello, everyone. Let's just take a nice breath and relax. There we go.
I'm waiting to hear you snoring. I'm waiting to hear snoring. We have a fascinating show for you today. We are talking about consciousness and our clouds of disconnect.
Yeah.
I keep wanting to say our winter of discontent, but that's more about the weather. So we're going to be talking about how vagueness, unclarity, denial, and other non-focused behaviors are affecting all of us. So stay tuned, because we're going to talk about how we can break through this cloud cover to experience the brilliance of living as consciousness.
I love how you put that. So here's an invitation to go deeper with us, to connect with us beyond the show. And you can join us at our website, www.consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com. Lots of comms there. And there you're going to find all these podcasts of this great radio show that we've been doing. You'll find information about both mine and Joan's blogs we write each week, about our meetups, hers up in the Puget Sound area of Seattle, Washington, and mine here in Portland, Oregon. And then we both do individual with clients and with groups. So you can find out all that great information there. And Joan's going to give you all the Facebook stuff and addresses and labels and whatever those silly things are.
All the silly things of addresses and labels. Yeah. All right. So as Janet had mentioned, our website is consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com. And the show is on, you're wanting me to talk about Facebook and Twitter. Okay. Back to earth here. I'm being vague and unfocused. Okay, so the show is on Facebook. It's pretty simple. You just find our show's name, which is Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, and you'll find the group and join the fun. You can also find Janet on Facebook, Janet Barrett, and you can find me on Facebook, Joan Newcomb. If Twitter is your favorite thing to play with, you can find the show on Twitter. We're at Joan and Janet on Twitter. And then I'm Joan Newcomb on Twitter, and Janet, though sneaky as she is, she's Janet and Beyond on Twitter.
I think it's just Janet Beyond.
Janet Beyond. Sorry,
I don't think
confusing
you put the
people.
and in there.
No ands. No ands on Twitter. And we're also we're on YouTube. You can find the show on YouTube, Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet on YouTube. And all our shows are on YouTube or in the process of going on YouTube. So you can just binge listen to us there. And then every week I put out a YouTube video talking about lots of fascinating different things. So you can find my YouTube channel there, Joan Newcomb. You also just can go to our website and find my fascinating videos there too.
All kinds of different ways. And so I do my groups. I do groups, along with Meetup, etc. here in Portland, and Tuesday evenings, Thursday afternoons. Oh, this is really interesting energy present, Joan.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Oh my goodness.
And Joan's got them all over Puget Sound, like I mentioned before. And where are you next, Joan, presenting your goodies?
I'm going to ask them if our producers are in painkillers. Okay, right. So you do yours in your lovely home on Tuesday evenings, then on Thursday afternoons. I do my meetups around the Puget Sound. I have 2 coming up right now. The one this weekend on Sunday the 25th is at University Place. Don't get confused with University District in Seattle. This is University Place that's in the Tacoma area at the really wonderful brand new University Place Library. So it's a free meetup there. I'm doing Conscious Conversations on Sunday the 25th from 2 to 4. And then the next weekend, March the 4th, I'm going to be up in the Montlake district of Seattle. I'll be there from 3 to 5, I believe it is, doing the exact same thing. We're doing Conscious Conversations, going back to the basics, talking all about consciousness. And I share with people a very simple tool for transforming your life there as well. Now, you have something, I know it's mostly by invitation, but, you know, people who know you and who know stuff about consciousness technologies, so you are just bravely going where you would never have dared gone before. Tell us about that.
So. All right, starting March 1st, I'm going to be offering 2 groups utilizing Zoom video conferencing. They're Fuzzy Photons Playground groups. And this will be just very, very similar to what we do here at my home. But you will be where you are. I will be here. People will be everywhere. And, using Zoom, the technology has shown up and seems to be proven pretty well that we can have an experience just pretty much like being in my living room. So we're prepared for that. We're geared for that. And I want to invite those of you that are familiar with experiencing consciousness technologies or want to have a pre-group meeting with me appointment, and we'll make sure that you know where you need to be. And it'll be 2-hour live interactive groups. And I'm just so excited about it. So contact me. You can do it through the website, or you can contact me directly at janetb@janetandbeyond.com. And I'll get you the information. It's really reasonable rates. It's, so the thing is, we want to enjoy our life. And with so many things going on around us, this is the best time to get together with other people. So give us a call or give me an email. There you go.
All right. Well, let's talk about clouds of disconnect.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you, Janet?
Well, when we were putting this all together, what I had been noticing coming up in group and in listening to news, which is always an interesting thing anymore, and in just my own awareness of what I was going on for me, within me, is there just seemed to be what we were describing is just different ways that we were feeling disconnection. And we knew we were disconnected because we can feel as we connect, which is an interesting thing with humans, right? Is this ability, we don't know what we have till we don't have it. We don't know what's bothering us till we know what's not. It's defining through opposition, right? Duality shows up. And so that's disconnect for me is the vagueness or the cloudiness or the just the different ways that we're not clear. We don't hear this authentic voice. So how about for you?
So for me, what disconnect is, it's being disconnected from the greater aspect of yourself as consciousness. Mm-hmm. And operating just simply as a body and personality. And the feeling of disconnect is very discontenting, but it's also very familiar because I would say that the majority of people spend their entire existence under the cloud cover.
Right.
And as you are in the process of waking up, as you are in the process of greater light coming into your life, you might be experiencing more senses of disconnect. And how that shows up for you is, becoming vague, forgetting certain details. Some of that is actually a symptom of expansion because time and space start breaking down for you. a sense of unclarity, which is this feeling of being disconnected from your own higher knowledge. It's like your computer is running too slow and it can't really get on the internet. But we're also seeing out in the world too is people being in denial. Miss Mary Sunshine, in kind of a crazy making way over things that are so clearly not okay. And I think about those times in my past when I've been in denial about something and it's like, oh my God, it's right there in front of my face. And I was thinking thus and such. So I wouldn't say denial isn't non-focused, but it is like cross-eyed. It is focused in your fantasy world as opposed to the clarity of what's going on. And I will also say that a lot of times our awareness of consciousness gets labeled as fantasy by people who are living in disconnect and don't understand what it's like to be experiencing life from this greater perspective of consciousness, or how you would put it, from this expanded perspective from heart space. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's non-focus, I think, is a good term. You don't have to call it denial. You can just call it as a non-focus because it's not there. It's not where your attention's at. And it's not there where your intention's at because you're avoiding it, right? We set up this contrast stuff. And so those are interesting things. And there's also that when you hear people say, I don't know, that's also a disconnect. And you can hear when it's such an automatic response to things. That's the difference between, I don't know. And you can hear the leading question to oneself in that. So it's a matter of what we hear and see and notice. And I bet we got to notice our commercial break, don't we, before we go much farther.
Oh, Janet, that is so astute of you that you noticed our commercial break. Good for you. So, boys and girls, Janet is correct. It is time to take a real quick commercial break. I just want to remind folks that you're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. And stay tuned because we'll be talking more about consciousness and our clouds of disconnect when we come right back.
Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs. Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye.
You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. To reach our program, please send questions and comments to consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. That's consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Now, back to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan, coming to you from Tacoma, Washington. And Janet's the one who's coming to you from Portland, Oregon.
Yes. This is where I am at. And it's snowing here currently.
It is snowing here? Oh, wow.
Yeah. I got 1.5 inches snow. So it's beautiful. It's quiet outside, which is kind of nice with snow. It does do that thing. So we're talking about disconnections or different ways, right? Clouds. And I like the metaphor clouds, Joan, because those are things that usually invariably come and go, right? You can have a snowstorm, for instance, and that cloud coverage is there, but at some point it's probably going to move because that's the way the world works. That's the way the earth turns. And I think what if it was that simple for all of us, is that we notice this and then it goes and clarity is there. It's like the bright light that comes with the light on the snow. There is clarity.
Yeah, somewhere there's clarity.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing is that above the cloud cover, there's always clarity. You know, it's like even if we're socked in here in the Northwest, the sun is always shining. Even if it's nighttime, the sun is actually always shining. And so I think of that is the essence of who we are as consciousness is always there. It's just how are we feeling it? How are we experiencing it? And if we're walking around with this sense of vagueness or being kind of out to lunch or spaced out, we're disconnected from the essence of who we are. And it's not a matter of being kind of manically connected and awake all the time, but it's more of a matter of allowing ourselves to drive the bus as greater consciousness instead of the sleepy cab driver who's normally sitting here.
So everyone just shift your focus and notice that deeper awareness that you're holding of the quiet of heart space. Because one thing that's interesting as you were sharing there, Joan, was it is quieter with the clouds above and the snow on the ground. And I want to encourage people to use where they are physically as a connection that is also what we're calling consciousness, always there. The sun is always shining within ourselves. And it is always within ourselves. And how much is reflected around us gives interest. And how would I use the cloud of disconnect? And it might be to take a break, because that's what disconnection is. And there's also re-engagement that happens. So I'm not looking to find fault in how I'm noticing myself being, but in allowing it to be free of a judgment and just going, what do I get out of the disconnect? I get protection. I don't hurt somebody. Whatever the language that you're using it, and just go, oh, okay, is it time to re-engage? Can I do that? And maybe get more user-friendly with it.
User-friendly. Engaging with user-friendliness.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I had something else just pop into my head, which is here, most of our listeners are either seekers or they've been aware, they are aware of consciousness and of what that feels like to be in growing consciousness. Mm-hmm. And I would suspect that a big struggle that many of us have is when we're like the only light in the room. And all the input that we're getting from left, right, and the center are people their natural state is being disconnected. Mm-hmm. So, what do we do when you're trying to bob your head above the cloud cover and it turns out that, it's really smog and you're being pulled under?
Well, for one thing, you listen to the show.
There we go.
Well, and you also hold it in the context that it's real. It's not just something you're listening to and you're checking out everywhere else. It is about noticing, and that's what I'm always looking for, to remind people that you are consciousness. So make that physical experience because we trust the physical much more than we trust the energy out there. And because it's our reference to being here. Okay. And so make it a physical experience. And if it doesn't feel like it, then just, well, what if it was? And I'm just trained to not notice. The not noticing is the disconnect. And so we just go beyond it and go, so what? So what? You feel disconnected. You are connected. You're just not holding awareness that you are connected. So get over it, move it around, and just go with, okay, I'm connected. What does that feel like? Well, how do I notice that? And where do I go with it? So I think it's about making things real. And we're very aware of what's real in our world. And so we want to allow this to be as real. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And when I hear someone tell me to get over it, I find myself actually getting into resistance. Mm-hmm. And I know that's not what you mean. It's more like stop being obsessed with it or stop being focused on that, which allows you to shift your focus to something else.
Right. Thank you for that.
And the thing I know for you is how you access consciousness is to drop into your heart space. And by dropping into heart space, it allows, it's almost like going into like a portal of vast consciousness. And allows you to have a deeper or broader experience. And my technique,
yeah, go ahead, because I have one.
Yes, hold that thought. So my technique, though, is for shifting up. So it is raising my awareness like a half step above the crowd, to accessing above that cloud cover from a higher or brighter space. So they're just simple, different dynamics for doing the same thing, and don't resist is the main message, because if you resist, that's when you do end up sort of getting engaged and stuck in the cloud cover. But if you can imagine yourself maybe a half step above, or just imagine yourself as a higher vibration or a brighter color, that also helps lift you out of the groupthink and allows you to be more connected with the essence of who you are.
I think what you caught is that when we're in a training mode, and meeting people where they are, most of us are organized directionally. So a lot of work was done, especially in our first years, is about, okay, get out of your head, so move to your heart. And that has a sense of feeling downward. But for me, I don't have any sense of downward, Joan. And it is just all there is. It is central. And so it's just a matter of moving my own awareness in and out. And that's the only direction there is, because I'm looking at how am I reflecting and how am I generating. And so it's just being. So I do want to make that course correction there. For people, how do you have your information organized? Because whether it's above or below, it is always within. And it's just our experience of how we've organized ourselves. So there's no judgment in any of this, and there's no correctness in it. It's how you experience your connection as consciousness. And so, we just want to bring that into focus, and that it's simple and easy and it doesn't take any time. It's just shifting that awareness. And so awareness is everywhere. We like to focus, but awareness is everywhere, and we just bring our focus to it. That can feel like a spot, because that's the word. Focus it's all directed at one thing, and it's also awareness. So it's a state reference information. So this is good terminology to get clear, and maybe some base ideas for people about how they interact with stuff. So
yeah. Oh, and the thing that I had briefly mentioned too, it doesn't matter about the direction, because in consciousness there isn't any direction.
It's all directional to me.
Yeah,
right? I wouldn't say it wasn't directional, but it's all directional. Yeah.
But it's all directions. You can experience greater consciousness within, meaning deeper into your heart. You can also experience greater consciousness slightly above the crowd, which is not necessarily a within dropping down sense, but it is still within your energetic space of how you are perceiving it. Right. So, just two totally different perceptions of the greater awareness of what's going on. But we're so habituated to matching energy, and having to match the crowd. And that comes from, when you're little and you might be the only bright light that is born into a group of people who are habitually disconnected. And it's really part of your essence is to help enlighten everybody else or help people break their patterns. But man, for you to survive your childhood.
Yeah, we get very creative.
Yeah.
Right. And then that carries over and we can feel that with ourselves. Right. And that's part of this that we're talking about is that we've generated thoughts to feel safe, and we forget at some point, because it's now into a habituated experience and thought, that that's not where we want to be. And I know lots of people work from a place of, yeah, it's fine, no problem, when it's not. And they are used to putting that face on it. And that is a cloud of disconnect, because they are not necessarily relating to themselves as consciousness. They're relating to how they feel about that out there. And even that can be tricky. So we're just looking to notice all the different ways that we interact, since we're so dimensional at any one moment, what's caught our attention, and where awareness is always present, and we're just not holding in an aware space, that's all. And what happens with that. So, yeah. I think, see, what I'm noticing right in this moment is there's a sense of tiredness. The challenge of how much energy, internal energy, because we have that as confined and limited within our forms, how much energy it takes to maintain not caring, not paying attention, being vague. It takes as much energy because we've emotionalized it, that's coming out of a wounded place or whatever place it's coming out of, as opposed to just an openness and, oh, I see. And there's that whole shift in that energetic dynamic that I can feel when I don't, those layers of resistance that we were talking about, that we can hold, that we're not even aware or conscious of. And yeah, you're doing a great job, people. Just allow yourself to relax, to trust. We were talking about this a little earlier. Why people, when they do energy work, for instance, they've got that in some container of, oh, that was hard work. And it's really not. It's really about a connection to where those energies are.
Well, yes, and I feel like some of the exhaustion is when you are, there's been such a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
In the news and everything, it's like you're always on edge. And so there's that, to me, is you can be exhausted and feel numbed out based on that continuous onslaught of disinformation and things that are designed to trigger you emotionally. And it's a physical tiredness. It's not consciousness, because when you can shift to your awareness as consciousness, you can be detached from those dramas and even be amused by the bigger picture of what's going on. You can just get out the popcorn.
Right.
All righty. Let's see what it's going to do now. So yes.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like, okay, here's maybe a trick, to offer people. It's like, okay, we feel there's a fire. Oh, okay. And you turn on the news and, there's 4 more fires. And then you have all this. And you can use the fire to warm yourself, right? And cook your popcorn, pop your popcorn. And maybe you can see that it's a way that it's lighting within you something. That all that's we might be feeling something about what we're observing is an opportunity to notice what within yourself is being triggered and played with, and as an opportunity to not judge it or go to trying to control it, but appreciating that. There it is. There's that thing that's been bothering me and I haven't been able to grapple with it. And oh boy, there it is. Okay. And now I can look at it and warm my hands with it, or it's time. The fire will burn itself out if nothing feeds it. And, there's just these different ways to engage how we are in our experiences. And so I want people to think about that, notice that, feel that. And what do you want to do with what's burning inside?
One of the things I find when I'm truly connected is that there is this just delightful flow of energy, or this sense of being energized, and that it feels continuous. And we had Lola Jones on our show a long time back. And
yeah.
She has, I've just lost the name of the things she does with people, but, what it does often is, they get this feel in this continuous stream of energy, and you're not tired anymore. You're not sleepy, and, you've got, 3 things running at the same time, and that's the greater consciousness is into form, and your body's not tired. So the thing I know when I am playing with consciousness techniques and I just like drop a pin into my reality, suddenly my alignment changes and my energy shifts and I am fully present in my body without any of the aches and pains that might have been there before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that, if I could bottle that, oh man. But
then you would drink it. Okay.
Yeah. So actually, this is where I was getting to. I had this flash on one of the things you were talking about, and I used the analogy of this being an adventure in density and effort, and like being in Disneyland. Mm-hmm. And when you're a kid, everything is real. So when you're at Disneyland, all the characters are really Snow White or Cruella de Vil, and the ride is really taking you to these different places. And when you're an adult, you still enjoy Disneyland, knowing that it's Disneyland. So I think that that's the shift, the consciousness shift that we're happening, and that some people are reluctant to letting go of the illusion because they think they'll enjoy Disneyland less. But there's a greater appreciation for an experience like Disneyland as an adult. There's actually more fun things that you have options to do. I'm getting this impression of all those exhausted parents who have had to stand in line for, whatever.
And they're not having so much fun, right?
It's not fun. But imagine if it was so. You can imagine this being a Disney World for adults, or a the Pottersmore, or whatever it's called, world for Universal Studios for adults. It's like when you know that this is an adventure in density and effort, when you know that, then you can choose whether or not to stand in lines or, go have a drink at the Disney, hotel, or whatever it is.
Well, I think you're describing another area that can be of disconnect. Is that as that child, everything was big and fresh and colorful and wonderful and threatening and exciting, and your emotions are right there. And one thing that happens is that child still lives within all of us. And even if we're as an adult and the body has matured, the child has gained in information and experience. And so we call that maturing. We call that maturation, we call that development, whatever you want to call it. The thing is, the child's still present. And I don't see that as so separate anymore. And one thing when I'm aware of myself as consciousness is that it's fresh. Everything is fresh. And the only reference we have for that is, well, that's childlike. Well, whatever you want to call it, it's fresh. And I can be disappointed. How many people do we know as adults walking around are in a state of disappointment because life doesn't seem like it used to? And that's a disconnect, and that's a numbing, and that's a dumbing down, and that's a lot of different things of the way we experience disconnect.
I totally agree with you, and I mean, it really brings out a very important point of, so when you're feeling disappointed, you're expecting Disneyland to be the same experience as a young child. And the thing I find when I'm connected with myself as consciousness and aware that this entire planet is a Disneyland, or a Disney World is better, this entire planet is a Disney World, that I can experience every aspect of it with a childlike sense of wonder. And nothing is disappointing because every day is a new adventure, to quote Abraham Hicks. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or you see even greater things. You know, something that we didn't talk about last week because it hadn't happened yet, but there's, you know, so one of the big exhausting things for us in the news is, you know, at this time, the latest school shooting in Florida. But what a phenomenon has come out of it. And the students becoming so empowered and speaking out. And where is that in our disconnect and conversation? Well, it's a waking up and people becoming connected with the clarity, the sense of, you know, making changes in the world and inspiring children to action. And it's another big waking up point. And I don't want to get mired into some of those details of the storyline, but but when you look at something like that and you go, oh, these horrible things are happening in the world and all, what I see is instead it's a waking up on a bigger level. And it's, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, the amount of powerful communication coming out of these individuals from this experience could be the tipping point for us, you know, having a huge shift in making changes.
Well, that was for one thing I wrote this week about that is, and I can see how when you described it as you described it, that one way we disconnect is we relabel things. And we are so powerful. If you relabel something, you can use it for good, you can use it against you. And and against you in the sense that it's not helpful. It changes the conversation, it misdirects it, and it does things. You know, what happened in Florida at that school was murder.
Yes.
Bottom line, killing of children and innocents. And that is my conversation there. And you call it anything else, you're redirecting it. That was murder and the killing of children and innocents. And we become complacent with our in a tacit way when we call it something else.
So give me an example of the something else that it's being called.
Well, just in calling it an unfortunate thing. You know, to the degree that could be a universal statement, but murder is quite specific.
So where have you heard it being called an unfortunate thing?
I've heard people say that. Yeah, I think that's kind of what you were saying. You know,
that's why I was asking you more clarifying questions.
Right.
Because that's not what I was saying. Right. And I was seeing the bigger picture out of it.
Totally. I have no problem with that.
Okay,
Joan.
great.
But look at the level that we deal with.
Right.
and look at the way those people and the way our collective society is allowing itself to be directed. And all of this is this whole conversation about the clouds of disconnect and what we're looking at. So in the usage of our language, we are keeping ourselves disconnected from our horror, from feeling. It's about our emotions, and it's engaging them. And so many of us don't feel good about being emotional. We don't want to hurt. We don't want to do this. We don't want to do that, whatever it is. And that's why we have these conversations, is to acknowledge where we end, because that's the only way you change those processes. And you have to first look at it in its truth on the level that you felt connected to it. And you are doing that within the state of being consciousness, not separate. So that is consciousness at play, being able to grapple with its environment. And I think it's an incredibly powerful time. And we want to do everything to support those children because they're trying to protect themselves from us. And is that really the way I want my world to set up? And the whole belief that violence is okay and killing's okay throughout throughout mankind, and it's always happened and will always happen, is just an excuse. That is giving in to not challenging yourself in how you show up. And that's just what I want to share with people, is we're all in this. And you don't have to have a child, but anyone sitting in a governmental position who says that this is okay, that's not my truth. And it's how am I going to deal with that? But the challenge is that we allow ourselves to get distracted in so many different ways. I just look at energy. I look and notice it and don't call it something that it isn't, because that's where we get lost. That's the power of our words. So we know words can mean more than one thing. So anyway, that's where I'm with that.
What I was reflecting on is the horror of Sandy Hook, and there was all these children, and that was devastating. And then how it seemed to disappear out of the news. Mm-hmm. And I read something recently is that what actually happened that we haven't heard about is how the parents, I'm losing the word, but the parents got together, and actually legislation has been changed over time. So it's not that it disappeared, but there has been powerful effect since Sandy Hook. We just haven't seen it. But the thing I'm impressed with here from the horrific thing that happened last week, and I wasn't downplaying it by giving it more neutral language. I know. Yeah. Because it was horrific on one level, and then what I see coming out of it is so incredibly powerful, and it's because of the number of students that the survivors that are speaking out with such incredible clear voices and calling bullshit on everything. Yeah. And so for me, I feel like that could be, there very possibly could be the tipping point. And how I relate this to greater consciousness is I feel that as greater consciousness comes into the world, it's a benevolent universe, in that we're coming more and more together to being in a harmonious feeling. And so there's more and more of a disconnect when these horrific things happen. I mean, if you just think like a couple hundred years ago, it was pretty commonplace to have duels. We resolved, 250, 300 years ago, we would resolve things with a duel. And that's not acceptable anymore. And so I'm fascinated by seeing what's happening. I'm excited and fascinated the response to something that would normally have been muted is not able to be muted. It's not able to come out of it's not able to be dropped out of the news cycle.
Well, it's the tipping point. And that was the writing this week, as I said, consciousness and reaching our tipping point.
Yes.
And those children are a testament to their families, to their parents, that feel that they are more worthwhile alive than dead. And so we support that because we know that to be true. And so we thank those parents for instilling that in their children, that they have value, they have worth, and it is maybe up to you to help me change for all of us. That's consciousness at play. It knows no time, knows no space. And, you know, we, in that sense of past, present, and future, we know that it's all now. And so this maybe is our moment. In a way, it hasn't been our moment for us to say, stop. And is this what I want to do? Is this what I feel is the truth? And, you know, it's like the fellow who stood in front of the tank in Tiananmen Square. And I don't even know what happened at the end of that. But it was such a vivid image, right?
Yeah.
And this was a man challenging something mechanical. And so often we feel that our society is full of construct.
It wasn't exactly mechanical, but it was symbolic of the Chinese government being this giant tank to mow
Well, it's
over.
this tank, and that's a mechanical device. It's not, it's mechanical to me. But okay, I bet we're on to time, aren't we?
We are, but I just love to see how riled up you are. So it's great to see the energy flowing.
Yeah, I
we
don't
will
get
have
riled up
a few
very
more
often.
things to talk about when we come back. But you're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. And stay tuned after these messages. We'll be talking about consciousness and our clouds of disconnect.
Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs. Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye.
You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. To reach our program, please send questions and comments to consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. That's consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Now, back to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host here, along here with Janet. I'm your host, Joan. I'm along here with Janet. And we're talking about consciousness and our clouds of disconnect.
Yeah. Well, I looked
really
at
quick.
disconnect. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah.
Sure.
So because you were talking about detachment at the break, but you were calling it disconnect.
Because that's the definition, to separate something from something else.
So I really quick wanted to jump in with my point before it disappears.
Sure.
Here,
Yeah.
Which is that there's a lot of disconnection and denial out there in the world today. So an event like this is like shining a giant big honking spotlight on the amount of disconnection and denial that there is. So that's another thing. And then you were talking about there's a positive aspect of disconnect, which I would call detachment, which is making a separation from that kind of insanity and denial. Is that what you were talking about?
I think so. I mean, I was reading definitions here, and it's, maybe depends by, I think, how you use the word. But I think that how do I be not positive? Because that's trying to go a certain direction. How do I just allow this information to be whatever I'm feeling? And I talked about that earlier. And it's how to use the disconnect and just invert it on itself. And how do we just say, oh, all right, I am connected. I experience it as a disconnection, and maybe really it's a detachment. And I am free to do something different. And I think it's just a matter of how we organize energies within ourselves, right? And free up the emotion, because it's quite shattering at times, the emotion, and we can get quite passionate about things. And just look at the dynamics at play. And you want change in your life, you have to create that. There are plenty of ways to notice it and embrace it for yourself. And we'll all be better off for it, right? Because we all make a difference in the world.
Yeah. And, the detachment rather than the disconnect. Mm-hmm. Many years ago, I was married to a drug addict, and I had no idea for the first 5 years. I just knew at one point that our finances got out of control, and it was just terrifying with no evidence because he was a covert user. And when it came to the surface, like how much debt we were in and the behaviors that had been going on while there was using, and it's kind of like, my God, what kind of denial was I in there? But I then had, as I was waking up to the horror of it, and it really, you feel more insane than the people who are behaving that way because, you're not medicated when you're experiencing it. And one of the very important tools for survival, for being able to step out of that horrific experience or make changes for yourself within the horrific experience. Let's say it's a loved one that you don't want to just leave on the street, but how do you, it's having this sense of detachment from the disease, from the person that you love. So you can even say this in a wider sense, is that, maybe you love your country, you love this, if you're an American, if you love this country, but you certainly don't like the insanity that you see of the behaviors in the levels of government right now, is that you detach from that insanity. We're seeing more and more insane things coming out of corruption and very dishonest, behaviors, and dishonest. It's not a businessman. He's a terrible businessman. His technique is to run people into bankruptcy, run his businesses into bankruptcy. He extracts all the money out for himself and then bankrupts his business, which destroys the employees. So how do you detach? How do you not get sucked into that insanity? Is you detach from it, and when that's not you being disconnected, because a lot of people have coped with being in those horrific experiences. Yes. So, for instance, we had a couple of administrations before the last one that I just didn't look at the newspaper for 8 years. Because I didn't want to see what was going, I could be content.
And I'm watching time, Joan.
Yes, we have 3 more minutes. We're not being reminded about time or space, but we're talking about things on all sorts of levels. What do you want to remind people about?
Oh, let me see. What do they need to know? We've got, join us at our website at consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com, where you'll see all about our blogs, our podcasts, our meetups, our personal sessions with people. You can find out our Facebook addresses there and, our YouTube channel. Joan's going to have some meetups coming up here in University Place on the 25th and Seattle on the 4th, and I'm going to start my Fuzzy Photons playground groups using Zoom technology. So lots of ways to connect with us, and we just appreciate you out there and giving us provide and how we all work together to allow conversations to come up and experience about life.
I'm going to echo what you said and just add a couple of things, which is that yes, you can find us at consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. Just type in the show's name and you'll find us, or type in either one of our names, Janet Barrett and Joan Newcomb, and we'll show up there. And it's a wonderful way to stay connected with us beyond the show.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Joan.
And thank everyone who's listening, because you have connected with us regardless of what time or space you're listening to us. You're helping to co-create the show as well. So lovely to share energy with you.
Yeah. In the quiet of that snow out there, so much can happen.
Yeah.
See, this is what happens when you go to, as you recognize yourself as consciousness, is you hear the stillness, you hear the quiet, and you feel it in a most
no time, no space, listening to it at the beach. In the sunshine. Stay tuned next week, same time, same channels.
Thank you, everyone.
You've been listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. And thanks so much for helping to co-create the show, no matter if you're listening live or on demand. You energetically contribute to our collective experience. Joan and Janet love to hear from you and invite you to email your comments and ideas for them to explore each week. Contact them at consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Tune in next week for another great show, and until then, keep enjoying this wonderful adventure we call life.